this before. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to the last session of the day. It is the last session of the day, right? Deja vu. Good afternoon. You are at the session for implementing openBIM and ISO 19650. Hopefully that's the session you wanted to come see, but just in case, if this is not, that's your chance to run. No, seriously. My name is Alexa Mitchell. I'm with HDR. I'm the Transportation BIM Program Manager,
and I'm Cameron Schaefer, also with HDR. I am our Transportation, Digital Delivery, and Data Acquisition Director.
Can you fit that all in one business card?
No.
All right. All right. So, Cameron and I have teamed up to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And I'll kick it off with just talking a little bit about the value of information management. And then I'll talk a little bit about what is openBIM, just kind of to get everybody on the same framework here. And then I'll pass it on to Cameron, and he'll cover the rest of the presentation. I mean, that's my cue to me. No, just kidding. Just kidding. And we should have time for Q&A if we don't get too chatty, but well, Chess is laughing because she knows me. I am chatty. All right. So, value of information management. Why do we even care? Well, because there's just a lot of stuff going on. Just way too much stuff going on, right? And we're hearing things like, oh, we want information, we want interoperability, we want cybersecurity. We have all these things, right, that are driving data production, right? We have more digital workflows than ever before, and the reality is that it's just too much. It's just too much. And so we really need to start thinking about how we manage information. And in the context of this presentation, how do we manage information for project data, right? That we're delivering projects every day. So, but if you think about all the different things today that we put together in a set of plans, for example, I literally have seen sets of plans that are as tall as me, which is not very tall, but in a set of plans, it is pretty tall to have 5 feet of plan sets. And it's hard to manage today, but imagine a world where all of that stuff is digitally, and if you are running a major project or even a small project, you look at your data file structure and there's like files and files and files and files of information, right? And do you ever have a project where the same team stays the same throughout the duration of that project? And how does the new person know where all your files are? And what you have in every file? And who has access to the file? And where are the files located? And all this other stuff. How often do we update those files? And so that's why we need to manage information. So what is openBIM? Who has not heard of openBIM this week? Good. Oh, you have not heard of openBIM this week?
openBIM? I don't think so.
Okay, all right. I think we've said it a few times, but that's why we have it, right? This week, you were probably in another session. Okay. What is openBIM? When we look at openBIM, it's simply a universal approach on how we're going to design and construct and share and operate the information that we're producing for projects, within the context that we're talking about, with what we're calling open standards. And so we want a process with openBIM where we are supporting all the transparency so that everybody who needs access to the information has access to the information at the right time, right? Regardless of what software they're using. So that's one of the other things that openBIM does for us. But also, it is the framework for all the rules on how we're going to exchange information in many ways. For those of you who know me, I'm pretty big into sports, and for me, it's like the rules of the game, right? I gotta go into my game, and I have to have an action plan, and this is how I'm gonna run the team. This is the framework, right? These are the players, you're gonna have this, you're gonna have that. To me, that's what openBIM is. It gives us a lot more than just the files and the formats, but it gives us the rules of the game. And if you do a search on openBIM, this is going to be something that you come up with over and over and over. You know, openBIM is the process of having information that is sustainable, meaning it's going to live forever, right? You're going to have access to that information long term. It's flexible, that you can do many things with the information as long as it's defined correctly. More importantly, it's a framework that allows you to be the most collaborative and in a safe environment, right? In a safe space where everybody can understand the information that you're sharing with one another. It's reliable. I think that goes without saying, right? We need to be able to rely on the information that we have, and openBIM provides all those rules for the same type of reliability. Typically, what you will see, it says it's open. And I added a neutral because I've had so many clients have a problem with the word open, meaning everybody has access to my information. No, that's not what we mean. Open is simply a neutral format, is a neutral deliverable that you can open regardless of what software you're using. It's interoperable. So let's talk about interoperability for a minute. Is interoperability possible without openBIM? Question for the audience. This is where you guys participate. Yes, no, whatever. Yes. Is the answer yes? Anybody else? Yes, but it's hard. Explain. Exactly. So yes, the answer is yes. You can have interoperability without openBIM, but it's hard. You can be interoperable as long as everybody's using the same tool you're using.
Could be easier if you don't care. And it's one application to one application. So to make, say the standards are not easy to develop, but they're better in the long run. Right? Would you say that?
I'm digesting. But it could be easier, you're right.
A one-to-one connection between two pieces of software would be relatively easy, but it'd have a lot of lack of benefits from connecting other things, and you don't want to use those two packages, and if you want to be open, not specify a package.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I get it now, Roger. It just took me a little bit, because I've had very little sleep this week.
I just don't want to make it seem like standards are easy because they take a lot of work to...
They do, and I think that's a great point, right? You didn't know this was a participation session, did you? No, just kidding. But you're right. I mean, interoperability is hard. It could be easier, and it doesn't mean that the standards are easy to make, but they're worth the time to make them because it's going to make our lives easier. Sir, in the back.
My sense is it was just one-to-one technology interoperation that you have to find. There's so many different systems out there that I just spoke with one general contractor, a medium-sized guy. He says he's trying to integrate 400 different systems. So when you get to that level, I think no matter how many standards you got, you have to move this way because if you don't, then you're going to be just digging through licenses like the woman said earlier. And the other thing is, remember, we're not going to be solving this problem with the issue, with the technology we have today.
Thank you, Jeffrey. All right. So I wanted to give you some examples because I think this whole concept of openBIM and interoperability is such an abstract concept if you haven't done it for a while. And I have to admit, it's taken me 3 years just to learn what I'm saying today, right? So.
I'll ask a quick question. Is openBIM trademarked by anybody?
I don't know.
It's a loaded question because there's other things that go with that process. I was just curious.
I don't know, but I can find out.
I bet my guess is no, and I bet it wouldn't be that easy to trademark that name.
Yeah. Do you know, Roger?
Is openBIM trademark?
Mm-hmm, the word.
It was. I don't know how that held up. One of the vendors had a trademark on openBIM, and Building Smart also used openBIM, and there was some discussions about that, but I don't know what the latest situation is with it. I haven't heard anything about it for a while, so I think the problem went away. But that may not be true.
So, Jason, because you asked the question, now you have to do the research and tell us later at the hospitality. That's
I know one vendor thinks they invented BIM, right? So that all happens, right?
well. So I just give you an assignment for later. Okay. So you say. All right. Okay. So I wanted to, when we talk about openBIM, it really talks. We talked about the rules of the game, and so I wanted to kind of go through some of these items. Like so openBIM defines formats, file formats, right? That's going to be describing that data structure for that file format so that you can share it or store it. And an example of that, these are file formats, right? So ASCII, that showed up better on my computer.
BSI has it. We got good news.
BSI?
BSI has openBIM.
So they trademarked that?
But they had it, I probably would agree with Brad, it used to be with another Graphisoft, and then there was some discussion, now BSI has trademarked it.
Okay.
International.
All right, well, I guess I better not get in trouble, but Ian is my friend, so I think we're good for today. Jason, I know you're an instigator.
That was not what I was told.
All right. All right, so these are some examples of data formats, right? These are things that we are familiar with, but at some point we have to define which of these formats we're going to use for that project. When we are exchanging information, it doesn't have to be one, but the rules of the game. What formats are we going to exchange for different types of deliverable? Data types. They describe the value or how things are expressed. And this is really more for the programmers, right? Like, what type of data type is it? An integer, character, string, all that good stuff. And I am not a programmer, so I had to do all that research to just give you a list of examples because I can't do a presentation without a list of examples because I am an engineer. So, and I don't understand these things. I'm not a data person, like my friend Sean here. Data transfers. We have to define the rules on how we're going to share, exchange, and access that information. And some examples of the things that Chess mentioned, APIs. Am I going to export and import information? Am I going to just put a whole bunch of files in a common data environment and everybody knows what that is? We'll just have a repository that everything goes there, etc. So those are examples of data transfer. Rules of the game. I clicked too fast. Rules. Describe the what, the when, the how, and the nitty-gritty, right, of things. So some examples of the rules. These are a little bit more, subjective, I suppose, but it's the standards. What standards are we going to use? Do we have a BIM execution plan, and what kind of information are we going to put in that BIM execution plan? What data dictionaries are we going to use for these translations and for defining this information? Those kinds of things. And then specifications, we're continuing to use specifications for as long as we have projects, right, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a good segue to talk about ISO 19650, and my friend Cameron is going to take us there.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm going to do this sitting. So Alexa talked about, openBIM and fundamentally how do we get this information? How do we translate information? How do we exchange? How do we make it interoperable? Right? And so this is a good slide kind of hitting on the formats, data types, transfers, and rules. Now, when we look into ISO 19650, right, ISO 19650 from what we found is really that enabler that's going to kind of help us to achieve openBIM, or there's a very common pathway there within the ISO 19650 framework to do that. So just going over, at a high level, similar to what Alexa did, what is ISO 19650? I know many in the room are probably, generally familiar with some of the stuff we're going to go over, but it's going to kind of help to tell the story here. But when we look at things like standards from ISO 19651, organizational information requirements that are going to encapsulate and define your asset information requirements, ultimately leading into the asset information model that is to be delivered. And then the organizational information requirements also contributing to the project information requirements, which dictates your exchange information requirements, and ultimately leads to what you need delivered in your project information model. So looking at this a different way, or through kind of a different workflow, that organizational, the OIR is going to clarify those organizational needs, the necessities, and the objectives, right? I'm going to keep repeating this stuff. You're going to see this come up in different slides in different formats. The AIR is going to be clear, is going to give you those requirements around their assets, their management, and the maintenance procedures required for the assets. And then the EIR, the exchange information requirements, are going to agree on how to transfer the information, in what format, what level of information, and establish a clear agreement among multiple stakeholders on how information will be exchanged digitally, right? It's all of that stuff Alexa was talking about earlier. This is the pipeline, this is the mechanism, these are the global standards and processes that are used largely outside of the US now to define a common way to achieve this idea of organized information. So why do we need ISO 19650? Why is it there in the first place? As Alex mentioned earlier, when we want to look at why, when, how, and what information needs to be exchanged, we need to define the information requirements that are going to enable those and answer those whys, whens, hows, and whats. And those are ultimately tied and verified back into the information model. The information model needs to meet those information requirements. Now this is done through kind of bringing together your three key pieces: your right people, your right tools, and your right processes, right? And we think openBIM is part of this picture to help enabling this framework, to help enable the way that information can be exchanged. So Alexa talked about production methods, documenting your procedures, collecting your information standards, having that shared repository where information lives, putting that all together, documenting it, having it agreed to, and then ultimately being able to generate the information you need, check the information, approve the information, and then ultimately exchange that information, and have a singular source of truth and record of that information that's been exchanged, what's up to date, where things are at. There shouldn't be any questions around any of that. So going back again, I told you this was going to keep coming up, but those asset information requirements, when those are put together, those should, at the minimum, give you the amount of information needed to operate and maintain the asset, right? And that takes thinking, that takes understanding what organization's goals and objectives are, and what systems that they're using, and to make sure that those are getting documented. Now the exchange information requirements, at the minimum, it should be telling you what information is to be produced and shared, by who, for what purpose, by when, to what level of detail, and in which format, right? And Alexa hit on those different formats with openBIM. Exchange information requirements help to define and dictate and agree upon what those requirements are. Now, a big component of ISO 19650 is the CDE, or the Common Data Environment. And a CDE is not one system, it's not one tool, it's a collection of tools that facilitates a process. So in enabling an effective CDE, Having things like a single naming convention that is used to ensure all files and all information are searchable and reportable becomes very important. How do you ensure that is happening? How do you check that's happening? How do you look across your entire CDE to make sure that that common naming convention is applied? That's a very important piece of a successful CDE. Having capabilities to look and record different metadata, revisioning, status, and manage change, and then ultimately enable reporting. With your CDE, you want working areas for each. In this slide, we're saying Project Co. It's going to make a second. It's going to make sense in a second when I start talking about the Canadian project that we'll be working on. But defining all the parties that are delivering information, how they access that CDE, what are their processes for coming into that CDE, for sharing that information, and then bringing that collaboration space together where decisions can be made. You need access and visibility of that information, as Alexa was talking about earlier, and that needs to be built in through security processes. Right? You need to make sure that this isn't just an open environment where everybody can see everything. It's structured, there's roles, there's permissions, there's access. And it's a secure environment. And then lastly, you need those workflows for approval, commenting, and sharing of information. So I'm not going to bore you too much with file naming, but within ISO 19650, there's a standard file naming convention. This is actually text from one of our contract documents for the project we're going to talk about in a little bit, but defining very clearly all information. This is not just BIM, this is not just CAD, this is not just a strict set of files. This is all information, reports, plans, photos, PowerPoints, any type of file, any type of information, having a common naming convention. So looking at, from ISO 19650, your contract originator, segment, location, document type, discipline, and subdiscipline, and serial number. You'll see right below it what we actually employed on our contract, and we've got pick lists that are lined up with our WBS and how we structure